everybody. I'm Matt Valley, and welcome to the Rock and Roll Research Podcast, where we share the super cool backstories and side gigs of the research and insights pros that you trust. Very excited today because I've got my guest here, Eric Hall, with me today. Hey, Eric. Now, Eric has had a very enviable career in insights and category management, having worked along the way for great companies, great CPG companies early on, like Nestle, Purina, Kellogg's, Coors Brewing, a few others. Later transitioned to the healthcare pharma space, working with great companies like Allergan, AbbVie, and currently with Boehringer Ingelheim. Right, so all those great companies that so many people want to work with, and a few others in between. So that's really cool. But now Eric picked up a hobby and a passion, life-altering passion, a little bit later, so sort of along the way, if you will. And I think it's just such an awesome story. And I can't wait to dig into that and all kinds of other things on today's podcast. So welcome to the show, Eric.
Yeah, thanks. It's good to be here, Matt.
Yeah, super happy to have you here. And I have to thank my colleague Kendall Gay for putting us in touch. Kendall's a good guy. He knows you.
He's a very good guy.
Yeah, he's a good guy. Funny guy too. So let's get into it. I mean, you've got a lot of this classic stuff in your insights background. So tell us how you got started and take us a little bit the journey.
Yeah, I got started in analytics with syndicated research with AC Nielsen and in the pet food space. And that was a lot of fun. It was a great training ground, working for AC Nielsen and, kind of on the consulting track and working with, Fortune 500 companies and big brands.
Right.
And it gave me a lot of the basic skills. And then, I got my MBA out of the way and I ended up going to Kellogg's. And I got exposed to more of the primary and qualitative research at Kellogg's. And Kellogg's is just such, a classic CPG company, on par with P&G. Actually, I remember we shared a lot of the same training programs. So it was a great training ground for me, to make that transition to primary and qualitative. But, I had found that a lot of researchers back then were either one or the other. Either you're quantitative and syndicated and analytical, or you've got that primary qualitative sense. And there wasn't a lot of crossover. And I found that I couldn't, create a discussion guide or a survey, to save my life. Yet a lot of the primary people, they couldn't, work in Excel to save their lives. So it was great cross training. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Cool. So, and tell us how it evolved from there. And somewhere you made the jump from consumer goods to pharma.
Yeah, I had a little a side stint. My MBA was in information technology, kind of an IT MBA, and this is back in '98. The peak of the .com era in 2000. Yeah. And I ended up I worked for two .coms, and one of them was a storage play called X-Drive, and the idea was kind of like Hotmail, this cool killer app of electronic email or electronic mail, and then someone would come along and buy it. Sadly, no one did. But what was crazy was this college kid we hired from UCLA. Tom Anderson was his name, and I used to kid with him. I'd say, "Mr. Anderson," like the agent from the movie The Matrix, because the character Neo's name in The Matrix is Tom Anderson. Well, this kid, 6 years later, I had a friend send me this article. Didn't you used to work with these guys at X-Drive? I'm like, what are you talking about?
Is it MySpace?
They found it MySpace. And your first friend on MySpace, I had MySpace account. I never used it. But your first friend is Tom. I'm like, that can't be Tom Anderson. The same Tom. It was Tom Anderson. So, yeah, that was fun. But, I got back into CPG with Coors, and then later ended up transitioning to pharma. 2007 with Allergan. And that was a really steep learning curve, but in many of the same sense, it was the same types of research, just a different category, much more complicated. But I always had an aptitude for science and did well. So yeah, I've been in, pharma pretty much since '07 and worked 6.5 years with your colleague Kendall, and did a lot of great
Okay.
projects and work with some fantastic people, and
Yeah.
learned a ton.
Yeah, cool. And you've been working with Boehringer Ingelheim for what was it, a
Mhm.
year and a half or so now?
Yeah, about a year and a half. Yeah,
Okay.
in cardiology.
Cardiology. Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of
Yeah.
interesting, right? Because I've worked, I have not done much work on the pharma side or healthcare side. And you hear two perspectives, like the perspective that you
Uh-huh.
gave, which is, yeah, they're not that much different. It's a little more complicated, but
Yeah,
a lot of the issues are
yeah,
the same. And some that say, oh, no, you don't know the space. So you're not going to learn it in a week. So not,
yeah. It's definitely a long learning curve. 6 to 9 month learning curve, pretty
yeah,
steep. And it's funny because you don't want to. I think you don't want to say things you don't know, or
yeah,
you don't want to ask questions. In front of certain people, and it's really funny in pharma because at some companies they not the one I'm with, but others I've seen. They can be really insecure about kind of like, oh, never ask a question you don't know the answer to. You're gonna look stupid. It's like, come on, come on. It's okay to ask a question. I mean, I was there a couple weeks, and in the back room, I asked. Someone mentioned tachyphylaxis, which
yeah,
I don't know if you're familiar with. I'm like,
no,
tachyphylaxis. I was thinking out loud, and
yeah,
my boss was like, shut up, shut up. I'm like, okay, Google it next time. So I Googled it. It's basically the rapid declining effect of a drug that requires you to take a higher dose. That's tachyphylaxis. So, well, I know now.
yeah.
So
Too
yeah,
funny.
but yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, super cool. All right, so tell us about like you went for coffee one day, right? And it and
Yeah, yeah.
and changed your life. Tell us about that.
Oh, it did. It did. I was at a coffee shop in Newport Beach called Keen Coffee, and I just was hanging out, and I saw these two motorcycles. They're BMW GS 1200s, and they had these like aluminum boxes on the side, which I later found out are called panniers. But they had these like knobby tires for off road. I'm like, well, that's weird. I've never seen a motorcycle like that before. So I asked these guys who look like Marlboro men, and I'm looking at these guys like with a total bromance, and I'm like, what do you guys do? Like, what's the deal with these bikes? Like, I've never seen these. It's kind of like a motorcycle version of like a Land Rover Discovery, a D90 or something like that. And
Yeah.
they're like, well, we go wherever we want, and we essentially camp off the bike. We've been to Baja and Mojave Desert and Death Valley, a lot of national parks, and we just ride around and we try to find like really cool dirt roads and camp. I'm like, wow, that sounds fantastic. And I had gotten into camping with my kids and Indian guides and Indian princesses, and I learned how to camp comfortably. And so camping for me wasn't like a huge hurdle. Like I already like camping. I'm like, wow, camping off a motorcycle. That sounds so adventurous. I'd love to do that. So,
Yeah.
I had a bonus and a tax return at the time. I pulled the trigger and ended up getting an adventure bike. I had ridden scooters in college and high school, so I knew how to ride, but nothing like a big, BMW motorcycle. So
Yeah.
I just I got involved with online in some forums and rode with friends, and they taught me how to ride. And I really liked this riding off road camping thing. I ended up starting in, I don't know, 2015, kind of my own social media community for people that ride large adventure bikes off road. It's called XL80V, or Extra Large Adventure. And the forums really didn't go anywhere, after the advent of Facebook. But for whatever reason, I got really big on Instagram, and so I became like this influencer. I've got like 188,000 followers and a couple sponsors now, and it's really opened a
Did
lot
you
of
say
doors for me.
sponsors?
Yeah, I got
Sponsors?
sponsors.
Awesome. So you get your tires for
Yeah,
free and your batteries for free and stuff, or how's that work?
yeah, yeah, and luggage. Yeah, I do. Well, it's not really for free. I have to like
Yeah.
share content on their behalf, but it's just a little side gig. And I mean, I look at my Instagram, online time. I'm not even on like 20 minutes a day, so it's not really a big deal. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's been fun, and it led to two things. When COVID hit, things started to slow down, and I didn't want to be locked down. And my
Right.
youngest was finishing high school, and he was going to be off to college. And I thought, wow, and I've gotten involved with a friend who started a adventure motorcycle kind of related foundation that involves a lot of clean water projects. And I
Okay.
done a few projects with him internationally, like Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico. And
Oh,
they did a project in an earthquake in Mexico City and a volcanic eruption in Guatemala. And they found that, being able to ride a motorcycle in these natural disasters allows you to get around really quickly and easily around traffic, getting in and out of these places with doctors and medicine. So I got involved in that, and I thought, I've always wanted to do an international trip of my own. And so I decided now is a good time. COVID really opened a lot of doors for us in many ways. Later, we talk about that in terms of market research. But I just decided, to sell everything and put the rest in storage, and got a motorcycle. Triumph helped me out. They gave me a media discount, almost half off a motorcycle, which was great. And I took off in September of 2020, and about 8 months later, I ended up in Colombia, South America. And I've got a lot of friends down in Colombia, and a girlfriend, and my motorcycle is still there. And so yeah, so I spent 8 months kind of traveling through Central and South America, and had a lot of really great adventures and a lot of great people. But yeah, continuing with this foundation, it's been incredible. We've met a lot of NGOs, people from different organizations like Global Empowerment Mission. Michael Capone, he's on the ground now in Rafah, outside Gaza in Egypt, getting aid into the people in Gaza. And he's also got people on the Israel side helping a lot of the Israelis just in need of basic essentials, food and water and things like that. And
sure.
I also met people with World Central Kitchen, Chef Jose Andres' organization. And I don't know if you knew this, Jeff Bezos gave them $100 million like a year and a half ago, just like no strings attached. Just here's $100 million, go for it. So I met a lot of really interesting people, and we've been able to get grants from various NGOs to do our own projects because we have a lot of people, but we don't have the money. They have a lot of
Right.
money, but they don't have the people. So we have some chapters around the world. I think our biggest one's in Mexico, and they're doing projects like every weekend. Clean water filters or shoes for kids. They're doing a lot now in Acapulco after the hurricane.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been incredible. We did another big project in Cucuta along the border with Venezuela and Colombia 4 or 5 years ago. We helped like 6,000 refugees with medical and dental clinics, and shoes, socks, solar lights, water filters, and things like that. And that's actually where I met my girlfriend. So it was a really interesting story. But yeah, we've seen and done a lot of things and seen a lot of tough things, and had a lot of really interesting, life-changing experiences. I
Sure.
wouldn't change it for the world, but yeah, and we're still active. We do projects with single moms. We find living in parks, mostly in the big cities in South America, like Bogota, Medellin, Quito, Lima, and Santiago. And we do this thing where you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, or you teach them how to fish, you feed them for life. And what we do is we give them a coffee cart, like a little small business, basically, where they can make and sell
Oh,
coffee
wow.
in the day, usually at like bus stops and construction sites. And we get them an apartment and I think a month or two of rent and a month or two of food. And we've, sort of graduated upwards of 300 moms from this program, and not a single one has come back asking for more money. So we think that's been a real success. So
Wow.
that's kind of like my sidekick, my hobby. I
Yeah.
still go do projects now and then when I get time, time off from work.
Yeah. How long would a typical project take you? Is this like a weekender or they take?
Yeah, sometimes it's just a weekend, or sometimes it's like a week to 10 days. Like the one in Cucuta was like 9 or 10 days. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
It's really interesting because you hear about things like this, and I think, okay, well, it's an affinity group that's
yeah,
it's doing good. But this added element that there's a specific advantage to riding motorcycles in some of these cases that makes
yeah,
a unique partner to help in some of
yeah.
these situations.
Yeah, it was a real epiphany that my partner Tom Palmer, who founded the charity, he
Yeah.
just wanted to ride around the world and maybe
Yeah.
make a difference with solar lights. And they were in a major earthquake in Mexico, and they just mobilized and started helping people. And then they realized after the volcano in Guatemala and Hurricane Maria, like, hey, this is like a thing. There's a real synergy with the whole being on a moto, because you can
Yeah.
get over logs or through a ravine, a washed out bridge. You can go across the river. And so we're like, hey, this is kind of a thing now. So
Yeah, I have one last question because I used
yeah,
to ride motorcycles a bit, and I just loved the long trips.
yeah,
And depending on who you're riding with, sometimes
yeah,
it's all planned out, and each day is figured out, or it's,
yeah,
oh hey, that road looks really cool. Let's
yeah.
just go that way. Um, so that 8-month trip that 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 took you ultimately to Colombia, how planned
Yeah.
versus unplanned was that? What did that look like?
I found, and a lot of people who've done this will tell you the best type of trip is the unplanned trip.
Yeah.
Go where you want, see what you want. I was in Mexico for 3 months and I kind of panicked. I'm like, oh my God, I've been here 3 months and I'm not even out of Mexico. So I kind of like made a rash decision. I kind of rushed my way south from Mexico City to Guatemala. And then when I got through Guatemala for a month and El Salvador for a few weeks, Honduras, like 2 hours just riding across to Nicaragua, I found that the border to Costa Rica was closed because of COVID. I ended up just doing nothing, largely nothing in Nicaragua while I was working remotely.
Right.
But for 2 months, I was in Nicaragua. I'm like, I could have spent so much more time in Mexico
Yeah.
or, El Salvador, Guatemala, So yeah, I think the best type of trip is unplanned, just go where you want to go and go with a sense of exploration,
Yeah.
and without necessarily a plan.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I'm totally on
Yeah.
that side of the fence.
Yeah.
So with something like this, has this changed your perspective on work? How
Yeah.
do you think about that? Is there anything you've taken from your experiences that you've applied to your work life?
Yeah. I think, definitely patience. They
Yeah.
say that international travel has a way of rounding your corners.
Yeah.
And I think for me, maybe that's just age too, being more mature. But I just may be more patient. It's allowed me to listen better and in research, it's really important.
Yeah.
Listening, not being so quick to offer an answer, which still can get me in some trouble. But yeah, I think, yeah, it's sort of rounded my corners. It's mellowed me quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. Makes sense. So one thing I'm really curious about is so you've now seen a lot of the world in a different way than, let's say, a lot of researchers might, where you drop into a
Yeah,
city, you go to the hotel, maybe you do some focus groups, you go back to the hotel, you come home.
yeah,
So from your perspective, where you're sitting today, what do you see the future of research looking like? What's going to be important
yeah.
emerging?
Well, I think it's definitely more global, and kind of two things. One is COVID changed a lot about the way we work, and
Yeah.
a lot of us work remotely now, and I don't see that changing. There are some companies that have this sunk cost fallacy where we have to capitalize our buildings, but I think they're finding out that people are hard to recruit and retain, and you and I can see on LinkedIn 80% of the jobs say remote, so I don't
Yeah.
think that's going to change. I think it's going to remain that way. And I think we can do that in research. There's some jobs you can't in R&D. If you're a scientist, you have to be in the lab. And there
Mhm.
are other jobs that are really important to be in a central location. But I think if you're able to travel into the office a few times a year, and if you're good and you're productive, I think working remotely is kind of the main trend that's going to continue. I think it makes when you start a new job, I think it makes it more difficult to ramp up quickly because you lose a lot of those hallway conversations. But on
Sure.
the other hand, it's a two-sided sword or double-edged sword. I think it gives us more productivity because a lot of times those hallway conversations are interrupting our productivity. And I think a lot of articles that I've read, at least Forbes magazine and elsewhere, state that working remotely is actually more productive and people are more satisfied. So yeah, that number one would be, I think, working remotely. But as another result of that, a lot of things have become more global. We have a lot of partners, vendors, team members, marketers,
Yeah.
um, production, sales that are in many different parts of the world.
Right.
So that's it's been even more globalized than before. And there are a lot of people who come from other parts of the world that are super smart and they're really affordable, you know. But
Yeah. Yep.
there's another challenge because there's a lot more depth we have to convey and train in some of our colleagues. So yeah, So
Yeah.
globalization is going to continue.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Cool. So you're a social media influencer, right?
Yeah,
This is a
yeah.
podcast, and
I have
now
a podcast too. Yeah,
and you have a podcast
XLADV.
too.
Yeah, if you want to check it out, you can find it at like Spotify or Apple.
What's it called?
XLADV.
XLADV. Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
extra large dimension. Yeah, cool.
yeah,
So when you're limited free time, what media
yeah,
are you consuming, either for inspiration, insight, enjoyment?
yeah.
What's
Oh
on
my
your
God.
list?
Like a lot of us, I probably spend way too much time on my phone. And a
Yeah,
lot of times just to veg out and disconnect,
yeah,
I'll mini scroll through a lot of reels on Instagram. Just I find myself laughing, like peeing myself. But laughter is very therapeutic and it's a stress reliever and it's a
yeah.
way to disconnect. So I do that, and I watch YouTube. Watch a lot of weird things on YouTube that you never thought you'd watch. This guy, actually, his name's Martin Douillard. He rode his bicycle around the world, and he's refurbishing these stone cottages in the Italian Alps. And he's like the consummate artist, graphic artist, and videographer. And it's just so relaxing. It's like my Sunday morning ritual. I watch him on YouTube, and I watch a lot of other weird stuff like science and technology,
Yeah,
space and physics and all that. It's kind of weird.
I do know that many people can relate to that constant scrolling, and sometimes you just need a laugh. So,
Yeah, well, a lot of times it's nice to just get on the bike and get what they call helmet time and go for a ride and just
yeah,
decompress without
yeah,
any other stimulus other than the wind and the breeze.
yeah, super cool. All right, so we've gotten this far, Eric, and we have not touched on rock and roll yet. And it is called the Rock and Roll Research Podcast, so we have to go there.
Yeah,
We have to go there. So here's how we're
sure,
going to
sure.
go there. Let's say you're stranded on a deserted island, and it probably won't be the first time, but
Yeah,
this time you will
that's
not
for sure.
escape. You're stuck there for the end of your days. But
Yeah,
you have 3 records of your choosing to keep you company.
yeah.
Records now. Now we're talking music. So
Okay.
what are those records?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. We talk about how things have changed in working with COVID and working remotely, and we've seen the music industry change where it's not so much packaged in albums anymore,
Yeah.
but the artists that I can think of, and I can think of a few albums, but definitely classic rock and roll would have to be Zeppelin,
Yeah.
Led Zeppelin.
Got to get the
Yeah,
lead out.
get the let out. I actually was reintroduced to Led Zeppelin in college for whatever reason. Like there was a dearth of good new music, and for whatever reason, a lot of my friends and I got back into kind of the classic heavy metal.
Yeah.
Um, Second, just to switch gears, some classical music.
Okay.
There's an artist I know. His name is Arvo Part, and I heard his piece played in a church one Sunday in Midtown Manhattan. I was there on research over the weekend. I decided to go to church, and they had a lot of these New York Philharmonic, professional musicians. They'll come in and play a piece that they're working on, and they
Right.
played this piece. It was mesmerizing. It was called Brothers, or in his language, it's called Fratres, and I was just really moved by it. And then guess what? I saw the movie There Will Be Blood with Daniel Day-Lewis.
Oh,
That
great.
song was on the soundtrack. I'm like, oh my God, that's the song. I heard it in New York. So that would be one. And then the third might be something more American and laid back. I really like Ray LaMontagne. He's kind of a folk
Yeah.
rock guy. I think he's from like Maine or something. And he's like, yeah, I've seen him in concert a few times.
Oh,
Yeah,
cool. Cool.
Ray LaMontagne.
Yeah, very interesting choices. There's the classic
Yeah.
Led Zeppelin, and then a couple of first time mentions here on the podcast, which is really cool. And
Good.
very interesting with There Might Be Blood. It's such an intense movie, and I think that the
Yeah,
soundtrack contributes so much to that. So I'm definitely going to seek out
yeah,
these.
yeah. Check it out.
Cool stuff. Excellent.
Yeah.
All right. All right, Eric, this has been a super cool chat. I feel like I'm living vicariously through you. I would love to do the same. Take off on a bike for 8 months.
Yeah.
It just sounds so appealing. It's so cool. So I'd
thank you.
love to stay in touch and maybe sometime over a pint somewhere, dig into some of those stories that you've got along the way, of which I'm sure
Yeah,
luminous. So
we'll have a pint or a glass of wine or something.
yeah, sounds great to me. So
Yeah.
let's talk soon, Eric. Let's keep in touch and rock and roll.
Right.